Welcome to Literally Alive, and just a reminder, we are recording. So welcome. Literally Alive is sponsored by Littoral Books, as everybody knows, Maine's independent publisher of fiction, poetry, and nonfiction, and publishers of the three books from tonight's readers. Leslie Moore's What Rough Beasts, Masked Year by Katherine Hagopian Berry. Please hold up your books. And Gary Lawless's How the Stones Came to Venice. Gary, your book is lost in the Aurora Borealis. There it comes. Here it comes. It's coming into view. So terrific. I'm not going into a whole lot of detail. Everybody knows the drill. Most people have been here before. We're so excited to have a wonderful group of readers. And we are going to start off with Leslie Moore. Leslie, go ahead and read. Uh-oh, hello? Did she freeze? All right, Kate, would you like to read? And we'll see if we can't get Leslie back. She's frozen.
All right, if it's me, I know just how I want to begin because I am honored tonight to be able to read with Leslie Moore and Gary Lawless. I wanted to begin with a poem about stones. So I'm Katherine Hagopian Berry. I'm coming to you from land originally known as the Dawn Land, sacred to Wabanaki, Abenaki, and Pequawket people. And I am honored and delighted to share some new work tonight as well as work from last year. So this poem happened because of Gary Lawless, who sent me a link to a video about Vishap, yes, which are sacred stones of the Armenian mountains. And nobody knows quite what they do. So, of course, after I watched an hour-long lecture on Vishap of the Armenian mountains, I had to write a poem about it. So, Gary, a stone poem to begin. Vishap of the Armenian mountains. My people built in circles. Vishap, dragon stone, water visa. Fishtails signal water danger, ram's horn spiral pasture hope. There should be true naming. There should be a glossary of signs. Woman, mountain, to tell me with her red hands how to sanctify, how to make this earth my own. I know they buried them. When they faded, when direction failed in their falling temples to the stones, made vase, icon, shard, obsidian, scatter fragment dark like broken space, like jellyfish a swallowing, as if to return stone to water, draw water from stone. Remember now how Vishap fell to earth and made a path of his falling, carving canals of fresh water, cradling all the loss he found. In the meadow, only blue remaining, the course of our lost wandering echoes like a broken stone. And I think I pass it to, if Leslie's back, Leslie, would you like to take it from there?
Gary's probably more suited to follow that lovely stone poem. Why don't you go ahead, Gary?
Okay. I will follow that lovely stone poem. Lovely. There are several, I can look and see several Armenians on this. Oh, this is great. I think you're outnumbering everyone else. So this is a stone poem from the coast of Maine, driving from Belfast to Nobleborough. Driving home from Belfast into the crescent moon, I hear the granite singing, and it is alive. I want to tell you that granite is a migratory species. Think plant think plate tectonics, continental drift, glacial erratics. You can read the flow lines from when the granite was liquid and moving quickly. I want to tell you that lichen is the language of granite, that granite speaks with air and water and light. We might never know what stories it holds deep within the rock. Now, Leslie.
So Gary hears the granite singing, and I hear the crows talking to me. So here's a poem about a crow. It's called Oracle, and it's after Crow on a Snowy Bough by Ohara Koson. It's a Japanese woodblock print. Koson's crow hangs on our living room wall, a black effigy amidst snowy boughs, the grain in the woodblock waning into winter. Crows know more about us than we know about them. This one speaks to me. I only hear it when I wake from my sleepwalk, when I pause, when I become the caw.
So I wanted to read one, since Leslie brought us crows, I wanted to read one about cedar waxwings from last year. My kiddos took a field trip to the Crooked River stream, and we ended up surrounded by these cedar waxwings. And the fact, as I researched this bird, that occurred to me, that occurred to the poem, I guess, is that cedar waxwings will share food. So the most adventurous waxwing will go like all the way out on the branch and grab a berry and then pass it back along the branch so that everyone can eat. And watching kiddos cooperate with each other on a field trip on the river, these waxwings seem to resonate. So the poem is called Field Trip Crooked River. Waxwing, silk tail, what you eat becomes your color. Gorging on honeysuckle, hover over graph paper, bottles and lines, plumbing this river crooked on boulders. We are distracted by your wingtips, very bright. On the branch you line up, one after the other, pass the fruit until all are full. On the bank riparian, children return to point out strong stones, hand over hand, until even the smallest has crossed, eddy and wave and the egg of the sky.
So everything I read tonight will be from How the Stones Came to Venice, which was mistakenly published by Littoral Books in Portland, Maine. You know, we all make mistakes. But I see that Lori is on here, my wonderful book designer. This book is such a present. It's so gorgeous. I'm so happy with it. And thank you, Lori. So a lot of the book takes place in Venice, where I was trying to figure out the sources of the stones. And this is a poem from the Venetian Lagoon. There's not much bird habitat in Venice. Everything living has been cut down. So the birds are out on the edges of the lagoon. Lagoon, Venice. Who are the gods here? The goddesses. Our mistake is to bring our own gods, to carry them with us. They do not know this land. Who are the birds and what are their names? What does the wind call the islands? How to make salt from grass in a land of mud and clay. We bring stone to water. Birds in a line, what language do they speak? Lagoon talk, who flew through, and who are you? Your song like smoke on wind over water. The saints heard you singing. Birds fly through the sacred every day.
So what are the names of birds? I have a poem from What Rough Beasts called Naming Birds. Who took a look at this carrot-topped bird in his herringbone jacket and ashy underpants, hitching his way up an insect-rich tree, and named him Red-Bellied Woodpecker? If I held him in the palm of my hand, belly up, riffled the pale feathers between his naked legs, perhaps a blush? Not enough for an ID at 30 paces, not enough for a name. Who ignored this pecker's crowning glory? His tangerine orange cap stretched from beak to nape. Why not orange coifed woodpecker? The name hasn't been taken. I've checked. Not in the woodpecker world, not in our corner of New England. We have downy and hairy, pileated woodpeckers. Elsewhere, black-backed, ladder-backed, three-toed, golden-fronted, red-cockaded, and red-headed. No more ivory bills, alas. My orange coif woodpecker has swagger, like Cyrano de Bergerac. Swashbuckler, poet, balladeer, both flaunt notable noses and plenty of panache.
So why I love these round robins so much is I just changed the poem I was going to read 3 times because Leslie mentioned the ivory-billed woodpecker, which was officially declared extinct this fall, which was heartbreaking and did not hit me on a good day, but hit me on a day in a way that I wrote a poem about it. So this is the ivory-billed woodpecker was declared extinct today. This is new work, forthcoming in Land Trust. My next collection, which will probably be out like very early fall, very late summer. We're still in that moment of trying to figure out exactly when it's going to hit. So this is the ivory-billed woodpecker was declared extinct today, which is why I threw a fit about paper napkins. They called it the oh my God bird, because when it used to unfurl black and red like a nation flag, people couldn't help themselves worshiping down to knees or cameras or just the blank film of their wide open eyes. My mother cannot resist family-sized bags of paper napkins wrapped in plastic. I used 2 tiny pieces of paper towel today. They should have been rags. I know my individual carbon footprint did not kill the woodpecker, who needed old growth, live oak, yellow pine, poplar, and chestnut that flourish the South makes a habit of denying itself, forests, burial grounds, red-throated bird, all sacrificed for progress, which looks like expulsion, flaming sword, cinder cross. I know we are all dying out. Child in the hospital, follow-up scan, unfinished math worksheet, high cholesterol, antidepressants, funeral, scars, 4 cavities, 2 arrests, unemployment, happy meals, Medicaid. The forms all start to look the same after a while. Failure, every single line, a breath you can never quite take. It's why we are all heading to the church today. On the ground, we will place the whole year a circle. We will say, there is no beginning. There is no end. We will touch the block for Pentecost, red like the crown of the woodpecker. We will touch the ivory star, mated voices waiting on rebirth. We will tie each thread together, gold like talons our fingers hold on, blessing, re-blessing the days we have left.
So, you know, a really good book about the ivory-billed woodpecker was written by a Portland, Maine author named Phil Hose, who actually went to Cuba looking for the ivory-billed woodpecker. Here in Damascotta Lake, where I live, we look out for the loons, and the population with the loon count every summer has averaged around 65 birds. What was that? That was a loon. So this is a poem for them. Damariscotta Lake. Do the loons tell their children stories of the lake? Do the stones remember the glacier? And the clay, clamshells from 10,000 years ago, do they still dream of the ocean? Do we remember the time before there were stars, before there was light?
I also have a loon poem. One of my poetry groups has tried to meet outside during the course of the pandemic as much as possible. And one of our favorite spots last summer was Lake St. George in Liberty, Maine. And a loon came in from a landing, right in the middle of our session. It's called Loon Landing. Actually, there's a print that goes with it. Landing. A high tremolo call signals your approach to Lake St. George, and you descend. Shallow wing beats, neck stretched, feet trailing, altitude, trajectory, flight path coalesce, wings fix into glide, feet touch down, send up twin fumes behind your flat-bellied landing, and you skim to a dazzling stop, head lifted, black and white striped collar, checkerboard back, and I can't catch up with my heartbeat.
I didn't want to interrupt, but it looks like you're done. Leslie, are you good?
I am, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Everybody's face is frozen on my screen. I'm going to try to switch to another computer because mine doesn't seem to be working very well.
No, I just didn't want to I didn't want to run right over.
But your faces are off.
Can I ask those who are not, this is Robert, the host,
I'm going to try.
Silent host. Could I ask those who aren't reading to turn off their video to maybe help preserve bandwidth? I don't know that that will help with the dilemma of internet in Belfast, but it may help.
Well, while we're waiting, I was torn between a loon poem and a Damariscotta poem, but maybe this one will take us off in a new direction. So this one is called, and I really hope I'm getting this right because I'm from away, Damariscotta Springtime. Really, the poem is just an excuse to be able to say Damariscotta correctly a number of times till I get it right. And it also owes its history to a beautiful conference I attended at Camp Kiev and just memories of being on the lake in the spring as everything is waking up. Damariscotta Springtime. I know I should be singing. Dawnland is waking, thicket barren, coiled fiddlehead, pine bough denning, brown bear pawing, all of it listening, demanding I step. Empty chapel, half melted candle. Remember how we blessed it shoulder to shoulder, bright belt, our bare feet, circling time. Behind us, the sun rose when we asked it to. The moon came to save us from loneliness. And I, like stream bed, like full egg, warm feather nesting, burrowing deep, perfect and fractile, all this web, singing where once the water sang. It works in me longing, loon cry, frost night, caterpillar poisoning the porch bench, danger and wonder like red embers burning, the sounding, our voices, the bright bringing dawn.
Thanks, Kate, for visiting our loons. I'm going to wander off here as I usually do. My book takes place a lot in Italy and Greece, but a lot of it has to do with stones and This is actually a poem about a color, because I was looking for the sources of pigment, another kind of stone in paintings in Venice. So this is called red. The stone in Jerome's hand, the thorn in the paw of the lion, red, revealed in a dream of Jerome. Red she saw, red she said, Jerome, the book, the lion, the stone. The saint stands alone at the end of time. Or Carpaccio's Augustine in his studio, a spirit voice telling him that Jerome has just died. He is looking into that light, the light where Jerome has gone. What is red? The red we saw in France along the Vézère River, south from Lascaux, animals dancing on cave walls in darkness. The red we saw in burials along our own North Atlantic coast, red paint people. My summer in Labrador camped at Lansamore, the oldest known red paint burial site in North America, 7,500 years, covered in red ochre, wrapped in skins or bark, a spear point, a walrus tusk, a bone whistle, and fires on both sides, facing west. What does it mean to be buried in red? Our own local red, oozing from rock at Ore Mountain, hematite, iron oxide, red ochre, red, Venetian red, the quarries just west of Venice, Titian's red, the women of Venice coloring their hair for the next 100 years, red, trying to get that red. We carry red, hematite, blood, and fire. What does it mean to be red?
Good question, Gary. What does it mean to be red? I have a red poem that I'll read, and it also harkens back to Kate's poem about cedar waxwings, although this one is about Bohemian waxwings. Bush on fire. The red twig dogwood crackles crimson on this March morning, spirited like the snow-fed stream below. I almost overlooked the flock of birds gorging on berries in its midst, each a black masked bandit. Bohemian waxwings, Bombicilla garrulus, silk-tailed, talkative, circumpolar nomads in search of fruit. These cheeky vagabonds pay me no mind, so busy feasting, drunk on plunder. I have time to admire their lush plumage, belly to breast to crested crown, buff gray to sepia to cinnamon. The air fills with trills, and my heart rings at this manifest thing, a bush aflame with waxy wings.
Oh, yay, we're doing red poems. So not only is this a red poem, it's a Gary Lawless poem, because Gary was sending me books. And one of the books he sent me was a study of the Armenian language, which is wild because I know like 0 words of Armenian. I know one. It's going to show up in this poem. But it was a fascinating read. And in the way poets do, we have magpie brains, right? I picked a few things out of this that just like live in my heart forever. And one of the things that appeared in this book was a quote by Lord Byron that said, Adam must have spoken Armenian in Eden. And I was like, this actually made me love Lord Byron for uttering this. And the other thing in the book was how the Armenian alphabet came to be, that the creator of the Armenian alphabet retreated into seclusion in a cave and prayed for language, and then woke up and looked out on the white snow and had a vision of what the alphabet should look like. And I was like, that's amazing. So all of this happened, but we haven't reached the color red. The color red happened because enclosed within the book that I was reading was a postcard featuring a Pompeian villa noted for the beautiful Pompeian red that backed all the frescoes. And not only was it a Pompeian villa, but it was a scene from the Villa of the Mysteries, which I had studied a bunch in graduate school and college. And I was struck by the juxtaposition between this sort of other culture world that I knew a lot about and my own that I really didn't. So this is for Gary, who brings me books on Armenian and opens my mind, and it's called Adam in Armenian. At the source of all the rivers, Adam spoke Armenian. Fire-tongued phoenix, Dur our father, flame-born, rising ruby red, singing rubiots, a villa door painted on a postcard. You send me with this book, my language, I cannot even speak or read. Yet, I know how the door opens. Patterns of initiation knock me, child naked, moonless nights and ancient history. We forsake these whips of grain, ears of corn, back-turned veils, sibyl eyes still lumen, words some laughing god mounted on your spine, along the road of all your bones, a snowbird alphabet tracked in vision, language pilgrim, refugee, exile, the book on the desk in the quiet room, like a lamb ready to eat from your stilled hand. The only word I know is Mayar, mother, the faint rose scent ghosting cedar cabinets, afternoon thunder, black shawl, a plate I eat from, mouthing lost sounds, sacred root words, a holy meal.
Well, I would point out to Kate that we are being joined by Judith Sarian, who's watching us right now, and Judith's father wrote that book. He wrote the book about the Armenian language. I would also, hi Judith, hi. I would
Judith, you got a poem.
Thank you. I loved the poem. It was very beautiful, and I would, I hope to read it again. And will it be in your new
It
book?
will actually. Yes. Yeah, it's part of the new one.
I'm so happy. It's just made me. It's just such a joyful experience to hear you talk about my father's book.
It's so crazy that you're here. What a beautiful confluence of fate. Like, you write this stuff, but sometimes it's all magic. So thank you for being here tonight.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Gary, too, of course. Thank you, Gary.
Yeah, you're welcome. Also in Venice, Beth and I visited, there's an island in the lagoon in Venice that the Venetians gave to the Armenians, and it has an Armenian monastery. And there's one boat a day out for visitors, and you can go out and you can go to the sacred book collection. And the room that many of the books are in is the Lord Byron room. And Byron spent a lot of time out there reading and said that Adam and Eve spoke Armenian. And it's just a wonderful sort of lesser known part of the Venetian Lagoon. But for over 100 years, Venice was the center of sacred book publishing for the Armenians. So there's incredible, although when Napoleon found that out, there were jewels bound into the leather volumes, and Napoleon's men gouged out a bunch of the jewels and took them back to France, as invaders do. We continue to see the misbehavior of invading forces. So I'm going to go to a different pavilion in Italy, and I'm changing the colors. So this is the color blue. Blue and what becomes blue. Mountain and what the stones become. Today in the Biennale's Iraq pavilion, we saw 2 lapis lazuli seals from Ur, 2500 BC. Lapis lazuli came to Venice from Sang, the Valley of Stone in northeastern Afghanistan, mountains with veins of blue, carried in sacks on the backs of donkeys. It made its way to the trade routes and found its way to Venice. Here the alchemists went to work on the stone, turning it into a pigment called ultramarine from over the sea. This precious blue pigment was extremely expensive, so it was used sparingly. The advent of ultramarine in Venice coincided with the popularity of the cult of the Virgin, and blue became associated with the deep celestial blue of heaven and with Mary, her veil, her cloak. It was used by Carpaccio, the Bellinis, Titian, Masaccio, Perugino, Michelangelo, and yes, later by Vermeer. Think girl with a pearl earring. The most expensive pigment of the Renaissance, it was sometimes included in advance payments by the Doges and others. In 1501, Carpaccio received 4 ounces of ultramarine from a Doge, as it was, quote, customary to supply the painters with that costly color. In the early 19th century, chemists were able to create a less expensive synthetic variety, but it does not have the deep soul of lapis lazuli. We search the churches of Venice for that blue, leading our souls to the sky. And a footnote to that poem is that when you think of that source of blue, who controls it now? The Taliban.
All right, I have a blue poem. I'm going to take us away from Armenia and from Italy to Africa. This is an ekphrastic poem after Blue Savannah by Dalal Ikar. And the poem is titled Savannah Blues. In a clamor of blue notes over a patchworked grassland, crisscrossed with creatures, her counterpane cut and pieced in oils, spattered with ox blood and chlorophyll, midnight creeping from the margins. Each patch quickens, legs flash, tails curl, ears swivel, hearts drum, wildebeest careen over indigo velds, zebras zigzag sapphire shards, a lion snarls in shadow, cheetahs spangle, guineas flock, snakes spiral, gazelles arabesque, a kudu startles on a path, servals speckle civets stripe, stitched together with grass and feathers, horn and hide, flower stems, and the leaves of baobab trees. Her canvas splinters into chaos, breaks into blue light.
Wow. So I was going to read an ekphrastic poem, but I decided I would take the blue in a different direction, based on the blue of Leslie's poem and the line Gary had about, people behaving badly, whether they're invading a foreign country or whether they're committing violence in our own. And this poem had been haunting me lately, as it usually does when the world is heavy, as it has been heavy lately. The origin of this poem is, I don't know for what reason this started, but I looked up all of the synonyms for the word grief. And I ended up with a poem that invokes them all in what I was hoping at the time would be sort of a temporary list of woes that we would transcend, but what seems to be like a kind of timeless list of woes that we're stuck with. The turn in the poem owes itself to a conversation happening around Game of Thrones at the time, which was the TV show that everyone was obsessed with because it was so horrible and filled with people behaving badly. So the poem is called Grief, Noun, Informal, the Blues. I have run out of words for grief. Sorrow, first tower falling, sparrows scattered all over the Union, misery, locker by locker, cafeteria tables unbalanced, sadness, can't breathe, anguish, no gun, distress, empty-handed wallet still in back pockets bleeding, agony, small bodies, so I think torment when the plane explodes, afflicted, Addicted to our suffering, death's bleak copy, chalk outlines always the same, heartache, break, broken, this heavy. It's ironic to talk of woe these days, like something antique, desolate heath, castle tower crumbling, so we hold parties to count bodies. This show is only good, we say, when someone we care about dies.
Well, since my book is a Venice book primarily, Venice has been dealing with the one of the biblical plagues called cruise ship, and Maine has communities who are now dealing with a similar plague called cruise ship. And this is a little poem that I wrote for them. Everything is holy. Bless the lagoon, sweet St. Lucy. Bless the birds, bless the fish, bless the trees on the outer islands, bless the waves and the wind. Send the cruise ships to hell. There is room there for one more boat.
I agree. I'm going to hearken back again to Kate's people behaving badly and read the title poem from my book, What Rough Beasts, after Yeats's Second Coming. A hawk gyres over blueberry barrens atop Beach Hill, turning and turning, casting quick shadows across frost-hard ground. 100 years, and the center still doesn't hold. A president who will not own defeat unleashes the anarchy of his blood-dimmed mob. They storm the Capitol in animal pelts and helmets with horns, use flags as weapons, chant feral taunts, glory in carnage. On Beach Hill, talons swoop to a bare branch, clutching a small rodent. The red-tailed hawk turns one indignant eye. There he is.
I mean, the part you all are missing because you don't have Leslie's book like in front of you to hold unless you're very fortunate and you've grabbed it. It's all of the amazing woodcuts that complement and expand and transform the words. I'm so glad you showed us that one. It's one of my favorites. So I also have a poem that picks up on some of these themes, I think, but takes it in hopefully a more hopeful direction. We've spent some time on the Armenian side of my heritage, but I also write poems from my mom's Jewish heritage. And one of the things that I think is so beautiful about Judaism is they always begin the new year at sort of the very peak of harvest, when everything is ripe. And for me, especially lately, that's been a lesson. So a poem called New Year, but written about mid to late September. Drive this mountain back road winding, day poured out from golden sun to golden earth, cornflower blue the bluing sky, enjoy the lake as you pass it laughing, water ripple front porch rocking as if bright wind had lent a gentle hand, set beat in your bones of everything finished. Forgotten orchard red delicious, sunflowers radiant heavy beside old barns, hay bales gravid in the resting field. Of course, it all begins again. Resurrection tucked around us, in fruit, in hands, patchworked mountains, flaming trees, fracture light mending, the cracked millstone filling, and you know what it is trying to tell you, the rich feast born from all that ends.
So I'm sitting here in the parlor of the farmhouse that was owned by writers Henry Beston and Elizabeth Coatsworth, and then their daughter, the poet Kate Barnes. And Kate used to keep 6 draft horses here, but she didn't live here, so Beth and I lived here taking care of the draft horses. And this is a poem that's in my stone book. It really is, but it's by Kate, and it's one of my favorite stone poems, and it takes place right here at the farm with those horses. Up in the woods, in the circle among the beech trees, last winter, one of the lumber horses split a stone horizontally with a clip of his big steel shoe. It had seemed to be a plain gray stone, but when it was opened, a black wall appeared, rusty at the edges, flaked with pale checks like unknown constellations, and over all floated wisps of blue-gray, trailing feathers of clouds. I brush away the fallen leaves and stare into the distance inside the stone. If one could become a bird, if one could fly into that night, if one could enter the light of all those stars, and then the woods become very still, the beech leaves blur at the edge of my vision, I find I am bending lower and lower. Kate Barnes from Chimney Farm.
I have a Kate Barnes poem I was hoping to read tonight, so this is probably a good opportunity. And this may have taken place at Chimney Farm. You'll have to tell us, Gary. As you know, I write lots of bird poems, and I wish I wrote this one. It's called Birds. The young swifts in the chimney chatter, and I hear the sigh of the parents' wings. The chimney is like a breathing heart in the bedroom wall. Rain is coming. A loon calls his shaken cry from the lake. I should like to send you words like this rain that is just starting to fall. Soft rain of a summer evening. Words to say that I have not forgotten the ladder over the tin lean-to up to that flat roof in the spring nights. How it used to be under the mad round moon that made the mockingbirds sing until dawn. How I hung backward over the parapet, dizzy, swooping, trusting. My heart was like the wings in my throat. My body was a bird's. Now I stand at the farmhouse window, watching the swallows dip low over the grass tops. It is years since I saw you, and still the wings whisper in the wall, and the soft rain softly repeats, yes, it was so. Yes, yes, it was so. It was so. Birds by Kate Barnes. Was that at Chimney Farm, Gary?
I'm not sure. The birds are right, and the loon, it would have been closer to loons here. She lived near a lake in Appleton, but I think she wouldn't have heard loons from where she lived. So it's more, it may be a combination of places as well, though. You know, poets do that sometimes. You know, they sneak around and combine things. So I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So this is the moment, I think, where it makes sense for us to take questions, if any are out there. All right, I'll MC this. So I see one from Lori in the chat. Lori is the designer of our beautiful books and a complete genius, who asks, have any of you ever encountered an elusive subject, one that has so far defied words or defied being finished? Do you want me to take that, or does someone want to jump in? Me? Well, I had
Go
one.
ahead, Kate.
I can go ahead. Okay. I had one recently, but I'm going to undermine your question by saying I had a breakthrough and found the poem for it, but it happened like 2 weeks ago. I'm involved. The origin of my next collection is part of a project called Writing the Land, where we head out to land trusts and we listen. And we hopefully honor the land that we've been privileged enough to stand on by voicing it through poetry. And this year, I'm the poet for Loon Echo Land Trust, which is in Bridgeton. And I had an encounter with my land, the Baldpate Preserve, watching my father climb this mountain. And I wanted to write a poem about it for literally like 2 years. And I just couldn't. Tried it, it was cheesy. Tried it, it was terrible. Tried it, it was forced. And then I found a form, and all of a sudden I found the poem. So that's a lousy answer, because my answer right now is I just kind of had a breakthrough on one, but it took me forever, and it took me finding a form that would unlock the poem that I couldn't find any other way.
Leslie, I'm going to ask you a question. This is Robert, the host. I have a question for both Gary and Leslie, and it might be a nice way to wrap up the show. Leslie, last Littorally Alive, we had talked about how you encounter nature, and I'm sort of tying it into Lori's question. How you encounter nature and then interpret your experience into either a poem or a woodcut. Would you mind just sort of revisiting that for a different audience?
Gosh, I forgot what I said last time.
Well, hopefully it's in your heart.
Yeah.
If you want to think about it, I can go to Gary and then come back to you.
Yeah.
All right, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Gary, I want to talk to you about, I want to ask you about, and maybe Lori, since she's here. I'm sorry, Leslie, I didn't mean to cut you off. Are you ready?
No, go ahead. Go. I'll keep thinking.
Gary, I want to just ask you about like the design and all
the answer is elusive.
Okay. I would like to ask you about the design and the wonderful photographs in your book. Can you just talk about that for a minute? And maybe since we have Lori here, she can.
Yeah, I would first say that I really had nothing to do with the design, and they wouldn't let me see the design. They wouldn't even tell me what was on the cover until the book was done. So I mean, I'm as mystified by this. I mean, I chose the photographs, many of which were taken by my wife, Beth Leonard, as we traveled, because a lot of them come from our travels. But I basically sent the wonderful Littoral people because I really trust them. And I sent them my poems and the photographs, and they said, we're not going to tell you what we're going to do, but there's this, there's this alchemist named Lori who I still haven't met and I worship at this point, but she just made such a beautiful book. And there'll never be another book like this book, so it's just alchemy. And when you think about alchemy, she's got alchemical symbols on the front and all through the book. So it's just, I said I wanted to have the book as a magical object, and that's what I got. So that's my answer to that question. Yeah. Thank you, Lori.
Gary. That's wonderful. That's such a great response. Leslie, back to you.
I have to, Robert, I have to say all the same thing about Lori and what she did with my book as well. I mean, it was the same thing. I sent her a bunch of prints and a bunch of poems, and didn't hear anything until I got the proof in book form, and I was just blown away with it. And I too have not met Lori yet in person, but she is my goddess. And I can't say enough good about the magic she does with books.
I would agree. Thank heaven I turned 50, because that's when I introduced Lori to Agnes and Jim at my 50th birthday party, and it seems like it was a match made in heaven. She's a wonderful designer that I've known for years, and I've loved everything that she's designed for Littoral books. So thank you, Lori.
It sounds like a match made in Portland.
That was Bangor, actually, Gary.
Bangor, even better. Yeah.
See, things do happen there. So, Leslie, would you like to answer my my original question about your encounter with nature? And if you'd like to pass, that's fine.
All of my work, whether it's poetry or linoleum block prints, usually comes from some encounter in nature. And I think it's really a toss-up what comes first. Sometimes a poem comes and I write, and later I'll make the prints, and sometimes it's the other way around. But it's always a very stark and vivid encounter, and I have a clear picture in my mind. And so my work goes back and forth with the printmaking and the poetry writing, and sometimes sometimes I'm torn between the two. I want to do one, and then I should be doing the other, and I'm going back and forth. I'm often writing excuse poems for my poetry groups why I don't have a poem, because I was in the studio making prints all that week. And in fact, I've missed the last 2 weeks because I've been working hard on a Ukrainian print right now. Lots of artists all over the world are doing prints for Ukraine, and or artwork. So I've been hard at work at that. Right.
Thank you so much for that. I have a comment, or is this a question, from Judith Sarayan. You all include birds in your poems. Many Armenian poems include birds, particularly quails, swallows, and cranes. I would love to hear why each of you write about birds, other than the fact that birds are very poetic creatures. Ooh, what a good one. Kate, would you like to start? And then we'll go to Gary and then Leslie.
Okay, I will start, but I really want to hear Leslie's answer to this because her bird poems are some of my favorite. You know, for me, a lot of my poems comes from this practice of just sort of noticing what's in the world and seeing the poem there. And birds are strong inhabitants of the world. They announce themselves. They talk to you. They appear. They send messages. So I think if you're in a habit of noticing, you notice birds.
Well, a long time ago, Stephen Petrov, who I think is still watching, and I made a broadside, and it was based on a culture in Indonesia where whenever a child was born, tribal members would carve birds and give the newcomer a bird to send their souls to fly away, to fly out into the world. And to me, birds serve that function. They're the messengers of the gods of the earth, and to listen to them is a great gift. And yet we never really know exactly what they're saying. But it's nice to be, you know, when you think about, you're talking about your experience of the natural world. We are the natural world, and we're sharing the natural world with many other species. And boy, there's so many wonderful birds. We'll never get to know them all, but we give them names. I want to know what they call each other. Like, what are their names for each other? We don't know, really.
Interesting. Tom and I lived over in the wilds of Cape Rozier on the Blue Hill Peninsula for 20 years, where we were surrounded by wildlife on all sides, and you just had to look out the window to see bears and foxes and bobcats and porcupines and things, and birds, a lot of birds. And 7 years ago, we moved to Belfast, so we're on a little suburban street now, or the city street. And of course, I don't have bears outside my window anymore, but we have a bird feeder, so I see lots of birds. And I walk my dog in the city park every morning and see more birds there. And one whole winter, I fed a crippled crow in the park. And I swear they all still remember me when I walk through the park, because the crows all talk to me as I go and let everybody know. So my goal this spring, as soon as the ground thaws, is to set up a crow feeding station in our side yard and lure them all over here.
So Team Crow. I love that. We have like a strong, vibrant, and sassy population of crows in my woods, and I'm their biggest fan.
I love a crow as well, and the cock is crowing right now to say that it is time to say goodbye. And Agnes Buchel would like to say a few words before we go. I would like to personally thank the poets for coming tonight, and the audience for coming. And here is Agnes to say a few more words.
Oh, I just want to thank everyone for coming. And the poets, thank you so much. Kate, Leslie, Gary, you were fabulous. This was a wonderful evening, really special and very inspired, but unrepeatable. Like, the thing about these poetry readings is they're unique. There will be another one on April 24th at Cove Arts in Portland, on Cove Street in Portland. April 24th, it's a Sunday at 2 o'clock. Please come. We will send invitations out, of course, but that event will be quite different from this one, but it'll be just as fabulous with the same three poets. So please come. Buy their books. Their books are wonderful. I also salute Lori, who is an amazing designer, and Littoral Books would not be Littoral Books without her. And I wish all of you a very good night and happy spring. Thank you for coming. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you all. Good night.
This thing is so bad.
Leslie, Kate, Gary, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Robert.
My computer's not working at all.
It was a little